that joke about garbage that was supposedly going to cost Trump the election? Yeah, no. Latino voters swung towards Donald Trump by a staggering 25% percentage points compared to 2020. Trump won the support of 45% of Latinos nationally compared to 53% for Harris. This is the strongest GOP performance among Latinos in a presidential race since George W. Bush in 2004, when he got 44% of that vote. Now, this gain was fueled by a shift among Latino men who backed Trump over Harris by 10 points. In Florida and Texas, Latino voters helped President-elect Donald Trump sweep victories, especially in counties where Democrats had an edge in the last two presidential elections. To break all this down, we are delighted to have Rafael Bernal, a staff writer at The Hill, who's an expert on these issues, following these trends. Thanks so much for joining us.
A pleasure, as always.
So we're not exactly surprised, because this was talked about a great deal, the strides Donald Trump appeared to be making with this group of voters. But you know, the vibes and the expectations are one thing. It's always amazing to actually see it come out in practice.
It is, and frankly, I think the question today is what Latino vote. You know, it's been segmented, balkanized. You know, choose the adjective. There is no single identitarian, push that got a significant group of Latino voters. It wasn't the joke. It wasn't the things that Trump has said. It wasn't immigration and the things that Trump has done. Latinos, by and large, just simply voted the same way as the general electorate.
But I'm interested, Rafael, when you talk about the vote becoming increasingly balkanized, do we think that is separated out in terms of the different, Mexican Americans and Cuban Americans and Puerto Ricans? Do we mean balkanized out in that way, or just simply separated in ideological grounds?
Is all the gaps. There is the national origin gap. You guys were talking about Cuban Americans before. They're still going heavily for Republicans. There's that ideological gap. There's a religious gap. Growing number of evangelicals flocking to the Republican Party, and in that case, for evangelicals, you can say flocking. Like it is a massive movement. So there's gender, age, education, urban, rural. Again, what seems to be gone is any sort of glue that binds these different Hispanic communities together politically. The cultural thing is still there. You know, the U.S. Hispanics are still a cultural force, a demographic force, all of that. But politically, that doesn't seem to mean much to individual voters.
Let's get down to brass tacks. For years now, I've been fighting with other people on the right, conservatives who are a lot more anti-immigration than I am. You know, I'm more in the libertarian-leaning camp. So while I want them to come in legally and not in the chaos and dangerous for them way streaming over the border, I do want people to be able to come into this country and work and have the government not interfere with that. I've been having fights with people on the right about this for years, as other conservatives have said, no, we're not. They lobby various arguments against that position, but one of them has been, we won't have the values that we share will be voted, Republican values will lose because immigrants are going to be so disproportionately Democratic. Demographics are destiny. I'm sure you've heard that argument time and time again as well. I have long said that's not going to be true, because these voters are not at all a monolith for Democrats, and some of their cultural, religious, political values are actually in better step with the right. Some of them are fleeing socialism. They're more likely to be religious, more likely to be Catholic than the native-born population. And so if there's going to be a demographic destiny, it actually might not be a destiny that's unfriendly to the Republican Party whatsoever. I think I'm a little bit right. What say you?
I mean, people do adapt to their new political surroundings very quickly. And the place where it's most obvious right now is Pennsylvania and Puerto Ricans. There's also large Mexican and Dominican communities, but the focus has been on Puerto Ricans in large part because they can all vote. They're all U.S. citizens. The Puerto Rican electorate on the island, they held sort of a practice presidential run, like a mock election for president, Harris won 75-25. I think there's no state. I haven't, I haven't checked Hawaii or Rhode Island, but there's no state where Harris had such a large advantage as she did in Puerto Rico. Granted, voters there knew it wasn't for real. It was just sort of a exercise. But that didn't translate to Florida. That didn't translate to Pennsylvania. And yeah, there is sort of this ethnocentrist, restrictionist, to be diplomatic, vision that, Latin American society is going to come here and corrupt American society. The most disturbing part of that is it forgets the huge similarities we are like between U.S. American society and the rest of the continent. We are all products of this sort of 1800s decolonization process that it led to these sort of presidentialist countries, to name something that we have in common. So yeah, the idea that immigration would change that there would be enough immigration to change the values of a country is, I think, statistically wrong, numerically wrong, and it might have some moral and ethical considerations as well.
Rafael, I wanted to get at some point to the gender divide within Latino voters, but if we just briefly stick with the Puerto Rican question, in your reporting you had spoken to people after that garbage comment. I don't really like even calling it a joke. It seemed flagrantly racist to me. But in any event, was there a disconnect in a sense between what those kind of perhaps more activist voices you were interviewing said about the ramifications of that garbage comment and what actually happened on Tuesday?
I think that's exactly right. There's clearly the advocates, the community leaders specifically in the Latino corridor in Pennsylvania. They really thought, and they are connected to their communities. They're part of their communities. They talk to members of their communities, every day. For some of them, it's their job. They clearly overestimated how much effect that would have. The one asterisk that I'm sort of holding out, and it's a number we'll see, is really voter participation. Like if voter participation was low, it means maybe voters weren't energized, but they might well have been angry over the joke. They just weren't energized enough to go vote. And we do know, like globally, it's unlikely, I think, that when the final tally is in, we'll see numbers like in 2020, like 81 million to 74 million votes. We're not going to get there, and the question will be, from however many votes are missing from one election to the next, how many of those are Latinos who, maybe they were angry at Trump, but just not enough to go, stand in line.
Sure. And just one thing to squeeze in before we let you go, Rafael. I mentioned that gender split, and it was very, very dramatic if one is to believe the exit polls. Latino men moving to Trump by just a massive margin, having backed, according to the CNN exit poll, backed President Biden in 2020 by 23 points, moving pro-Trump by 10 points. We didn't see anything approaching that movement among Latina women. We don't shy away from the awkward questions here. I mean, is sexism part of that pattern?
It probably is, and I think it's the big question there is the sort of Latino identity didn't drive voting behavior, but did young male, maybe machismo, maybe just sexism, misogyny, I don't know, but did that identity drive voting behavior? And I think in a global perspective, like around the general electorate, you see this a lot. Younger men, especially younger and educated men, going toward Trump, sort of from a personal identity standpoint. And there is some irony that the possibility that for many of those young Latinos, and of course we don't know, and I don't know if it's a knowable, but the possibility that their identity as young male Americans was more forceful in determining their voter intent than their Latino identity, it's entirely possible. And again, that speaks to people assimilating and to people people becoming more like the culture that surrounds them rather than the other way around.
Rafael, thank you so much for joining us and for looking at these trends. We're going to be following them for some time. We appreciate it.
Yes, we will.